My first job, I made $6 an hour. My first paycheck, I used it to buy the boots I needed to keep that job. I'm Ron DeSantis. We've all had similar choices. Like a lot of people, I worked my way through college, sweeping floors, parking cars, making the most of an opportunity. Afterwards, I wanted to serve, but traded in the work boots for these boots, joining the Navy and volunteering to serve in Iraq. As governor, I'll keep working just as hard to serve you.
I'm Casey Flaherty of Delray Honda, and we're proud to be the official sponsor of Traffic Tractor 12. This Honda Pilot EX has all-wheel drive, 280 horsepower, a V6 engine, and 18-inch alloy wheels. And you can get your own Honda Pilot almost like this one here at Delray Honda.
At Papa John's, when it comes to better ingredients, better pizza, we deliver. And now, in addition to delivering a pizza topped with quality ingredients like real meats with no fillers, fresh sliced Roma tomatoes, onions, and green peppers, and fresh, never frozen hand-tossed original dough, we're delivering even more value with this special offer.
Nothing says extra value quite like our large up to 5-topping pizza for only $13. Order online at papajohns.com. Better ingredients, better pizza. Papa John's.
CBS 12 News takes your questions directly to the candidates for long-form interviews, so you understand their positions on the issues that impact you. Choose beyond the podium election coverage on CBS 12 News. Welcome back to the congressional debate for Florida's 18th district between the incumbent Republican Representative Brian Mast and Democratic challenger Lauren Baer. Produced and presented by CBS 12 News, Palm Beach North Chamber of Commerce, and Palm Beach State College.
Welcome back, everyone. We now begin with our first round of general questions from our panelists. Ms. Samples, we'll begin with you.
Thank you, Liz and candidates. Florida is experiencing its worst red tide bloom in recent history, raising major environmental and public health concerns. What started out as a Southwest Florida problem is now an East Coast Florida problem. It's been confirmed in all 3 counties in District 18. Though the toxic algae that causes red tide is naturally occurring, there's scientific evidence that it is made worse by nutrient pollution from agriculture and development. The question is, what role should the federal government, specifically the EPA and Congress, play in addressing red tide in Florida?
Congressman Mast, you have 60 seconds.
Certainly. So when we're talking about red tide in Florida and toxic algal blooms coming out of Lake Okeechobee, this has been the #1 issue that I've worked on since being in Congress, and it's what I'll continue to work on as that chairman of the Committee of Coast Guard and Maritime, being on the Water Resources and Environment Subcommittee. The way that we work on this as legislators from Washington, D.C. is pushing the EPA to also push the Florida Department of Environmental Protections, who is in charge of state water quality issues, to make sure that they're putting in maximum daily loads for nutrients that come in from the Kissimmee River from the north, for maximum daily loads of nutrients coming off of agricultural lands to the south, making sure that those waters can't flow into Lake Okeechobee, making sure that pollution that comes in from those waterways is stopped before it ever gets there. That's the approach that we have to take as the federal government. It's the #1 thing that I work on, and I'm proud to continue to work on that.
Ms. Baer, you have 60 seconds.
The algae crisis we are facing, both in terms of red tide and toxic blue-green algae, is an environmental crisis. It's a public health crisis, and it's an economic crisis in a part of the world where we make our money off of the water. Now, unfortunately, my opponent, Congressman Mast, has spent most of his time in Washington ignoring this problem until it was an election year, and then when he focused on it, not focusing on the underlying pollution that causes algae blooms. The specific question asked was about the EPA. I'd like to note that the congressman has supported a climate change denialist at the head of the EPA, has supported the gutting of the EPA's budget by the Trump administration, has supported the elimination of key experts in the EPA and replacing them with corporate lobbyists who come from polluting industries. At the end of the day, if we're going to deal with our algal crisis, we need to deal with the pollution crisis, which means we need to have a representative who isn't funded by corporate polluters and is going to be committed to letting the EPA actually do its job.
Congressman Mast, you have a 30-second rebuttal.
So my opponent has said that this is just an election year issue for me. The fact of the matter is I sat on this stage over 2 years ago and laid out a plan for the way that I was going to work on this, be on the Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure, work on a bill known as the Water Resources and Development Act. We recently passed that through Congress, passed it through the Senate with the provisions in it for the reservoir south of Lake Okeechobee and a demand that we redo something known as the Lake Okeechobee Regulation Schedule. I've been working on this since day one.
Ms. Baer, you have 30 seconds.
The year the Congressman first ran for office, toxic algae covered 200 square miles of Lake Okeechobee. This year, it covers more than 650. And the Congressman, while he spent his first couple of months writing letters and making statements, didn't propose the kind of legislation that environmentalists and scientists in our community have been suggesting for years. This is a problem that needs to be confronted on day one because it's an existential crisis for our community. We can't afford a Congressman who waits to act on this issue until it earns him votes.
Mr. Bennett, your question for the candidates.
Many Democrats, including Ms. Baer, have said that the FBI investigation into the sexual assault allegations against Justice Brett Kavanaugh was not lengthy enough. Two-part question for each of you. First, do you think that Justice Kavanaugh testified truthfully at his confirmation hearing? And secondly, would you support any Congress ordering any additional investigation of the allegations against him?
Ms. Baer, you have 60 seconds.
First, I will say that as a lawyer, I understand that our faith in the Supreme Court rests on our belief that the court is above politics, our ability to trust these 9 justices who adjudicate the most controversial cases in our country as being above petty political actions. Now, anyone who watched that confirmation process knows that what happened was a rush to confirmation, to have it happen before the midterms, rather than a search to get to the truth. That concerns me because whether or not we were going to confirm Kavanaugh at the end, what we need is for people to have faith and trust in the system, and that was ultimately lost. I have been clear throughout this campaign that I think that process and getting to the bottom of facts are the most important thing to ensure that we have faith in our judicial system and that we have faith in our government overall.
Congressman Mast, you have 60 seconds.
So let me actually answer the question. Yes, I do personally believe that Justice Kavanaugh testified truthfully. But beyond that, it's important to say that my feelings don't necessarily matter in this. What matter are facts. What matters is, has there been anything put forward to corroborate that there was any assault by Justice Kavanaugh when he was 17 years old? And the investigations that were put forward yielded nothing to corroborate that. And that's what matters, and that's why Justice Kavanaugh was moved forward in this process. Now, I agree that this process was disgusting to watch. I've spoke about it before as a father, saying very simply that I have a daughter, and I hope that if my daughter ever made a claim like that, that it was taken completely seriously, it wasn't used as some kind of partisan game, and that I have 2 sons and I have a little boy on the way, and I hope that there is never a rush to judge my 2 boys, that they're always given their process of due process. That's something that is important. It's a foundation of our system, and it has to continue to exist for every single person out there.
Ms. Baer, you have a 30-second rebuttal.
A seat on the Supreme Court is something that is earned. It's not something one is entitled to. And as a woman, like all women in this room, I know people who've been assaulted, who've been discriminated against, who've been the subject of harassment. And I also know that when you see a hearing pushed through in a matter of days, an FBI investigation being forced to take place in under a week, it makes women around the country feel as though the Judiciary Committee wasn't interested in getting to the bottom of the truth, and that's a fact.
Ms. McPherson, your question for the candidates.
Thank you. We briefly discussed red tide and algal blooms in our first question, but specifically talking about toxic blue-green algae. There's a lot of people playing the blame game, pointing fingers. But who do you believe is responsible? How can we get to the root of the problem, and what can Congress actually do about it now, not in several years when it just gets worse.
Congressman Mast, you have 60 seconds.
The root of the problem for toxic algal blooms on Lake Okeechobee is very simply the nutrients that are coming into Lake Okeechobee. That's what's causing those algal blooms. We need to stop them coming in from the north. We need to stop them from coming in from the south. That's what I've worked on. That's what the reservoir south of Lake Okeechobee, where I wrote the amendment, passed it through the Water Resources and Development Act, got that heading to the president's desk to be signed into law. That's what that is all about, redoing the Lake Okeechobee regulation schedule. That's what that's all about. A bill that I wrote called Stop Harmful Discharges Act that my opponent has disagreed with, saying that we need to manage Lake Okeechobee, thinking about, most importantly, human health and human safety when we're thinking about those discharges. This is something that I wrote, that I put forward because I believe it's the right thing to do. This is, again, the #1 issue that I am very proud to go out there and work on. And if it's not the #1 issue that you work on, with all of the entrenched interests out there, you cannot be effective on this issue. That much I can promise.
Ms. Baer, you have 60 seconds.
First of all, I'll say we're electing a congressperson to address all of our community's issues, not just one of them. Now, when it comes to what causes algal blooms, it's a very simple recipe: nitrogen plus phosphorus plus water plus heat. I've proposed putting hard limits on the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus that can enter our water, both from the south from Big Sugar and from the north from the Kissimmee River. The fact remains that Congressman Mast has consistently voted in ways that will allow agriculture and industry to continue dumping pollutants in our water, at the same time that he's been okay with a gutting of the EPA, and as well the elimination of climate science from what the EPA does, which is important because as our climate warms, our toxic algal blooms become worse. In order to comprehensively address this problem, we have to have hard limits on nitrogen and phosphorus going into our water. We have to have proper EPA oversight. We have to fully implement and authorize SERP, and we have to ensure that health and human safety are related to the discharges. But we can't just do one thing.
Congressman Mast, you have a 30-second rebuttal.
I'm glad that my opponent agrees with so many things that I've gone out there and actually had placed into law. As I said, this is what I work on every single day, what my staff works on every single day. It's what we work on getting to the president's desk, and that's why these things are coming to fruition. That's reservoir south of Lake Okeechobee, redoing the Lake Okeechobee regulation schedule. This is what brings to fruition that we don't have those discharges in our community any longer.
Ms. Baer, you have 30 seconds.
The congressman may be working on this each and every day, but not in ways that fully help our community. He wants to pat himself on the back for getting one of more than 60 of the projects from SERP authorized. And I would note that at the same time that individuals in our community are getting terribly ill from algal blooms, our congressman is voting to take away their health care. I ask you, is that comprehensively and adequately dealing with the problem that we're confronting here?
Congressman Mast, my apologies. I did not give you your 30-second rebuttal. If you wish to, you can do that now regarding the Kavanaugh question. It's up to you.
Certainly. So I've already spoke about Justice Kavanaugh and my remarks on that, but I would go back to what's going on our water issue. My opponent has given us no indication of the committees that she wishes to serve on as a member of Congress. As I sat on this stage 2 years ago with you, I told you that I would get placed on the Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure because this would be the #1 issue that I work on. My opponent has said very specifically this will not be her #1 issue, and as a result, she will not be effective on this issue.
All right, we're going to move now to the viewer questions. It's a direct question for each of you, and then you each have a rebuttal. This first direct question goes to Congressman Mast. This is from Tracy C. You voted yay on Bill H.R. 7, saying the federal government will not provide monetary help for abortions, but instead makes women purchase specific medical insurance that covers abortions. How do you think it is fair to women to require them to purchase insurance that men don't need? And you have 90 seconds for this question.
I do not believe that it's the role of the federal government to go out and fund abortions. I've been very clear that I am a pro-life candidate. I believe that human life has intrinsic value. I believe that life, even inside the womb, has rights. I look at this as a father with one on the way, 2 little boys, a little girl, and I can tell you that every single time I open up a drawer, I have ultrasound images where I can look at those and say, when I looked at those ultrasound images, I said, that's my son, that's my daughter. That's not a clump of cells, it's a human being. And that's why I can't support the federal government going out there and funding abortion.
Ms. Baer, you have 45 seconds to rebut.
I believe in a woman's right to choose And I believe in a woman's right to choose as a woman who's carried a baby in my womb myself, who knows that giving birth to and caring for a child is the most significant decision any woman would have to make in her life, and therefore a decision that should only be made between a woman, her partner, and her medical professionals. I also know that reproductive freedom is core to women's freedom overall, and that if women are going to be full members of society, in the economic sphere, in the political sphere, in the social sphere, then those women need to have control over their bodies. What Congressman Mast is pushing forward is a radical agenda that would allow the government to control women's bodies and is fundamentally inconsistent with his rhetoric, saying that what he wishes to promote is freedom.
This next question is a direct question for Ms. Baer. It's from Courtney T. As a former State Department employee under John Kerry, do you support the Iran nuclear deal and the cash payments to Iran from the Obama administration? You have 90 seconds.
I believe that Iran is a significant nuclear threat, and one of the most important things that we can do for our national security is to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions. I know that's important to our national security here in the United States. I know that's important to the stability of the Middle East region. And I know that's important to the security of the State of Israel, which I care about deeply as a member of the Jewish community. Now, when I look at the Iran nuclear deal, it had obvious limitations. It had sunset clauses that it shouldn't have had. It didn't properly address Iran's domestic human rights abuses or malign behavior internationally. But it was the best opportunity we had on the table in conjunction with all of our allies to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions and keep Israel and the United States safer. And what this administration has done in walking away from that deal, leaving the table, is eliminate any kind of leverage we might have had to improve the deficiencies in the deal. As a foreign policy expert, as someone who spent 6 years at the senior-most level of our foreign policy apparatus, I know that that makes all of us less safe, not more safe, and that's why I disagree with it.
Congressman Mast, you have 45 seconds for a rebuttal.
I can tell you that as the United States of America, we are only limited by our imagination. Now, the question wasn't actually answered. Was that $150 billion payment to Iran justly sent there, or should it not have been sent there? I can say concretely, I don't believe that we should have sent $150 billion to the largest state sponsor of terror, also signed a deal that allowed Iran to sell 90% of their fissile material to Russia, a deal that allowed this country that has been out there killing my fellow service members on the battlefield, putting explosively formed projectiles in Iraq, putting improvised explosive devices in Afghanistan. That is not a country that we should be giving $150 billion to, and I'm glad that the President got rid of that deal in his first term as office.
All right, now we will begin round two from our panelists. These are direct questions for the candidates. Ms. Samples, you have a direct question for Ms. Baer?
Yes, I do. You've been a harsh critic of Congressman Mast's decision, his vote to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and you say you would support a health care plan advanced by Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut if you were elected. It allows people to buy into Medicare and Medicaid. How would you ensure premiums would be reasonable and taxpayers, including seniors now covered by Medicare, would be protected under this plan?
You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. First of all, let me reiterate, I think health care is a right, not a privilege, and that no person in our country, the wealthiest country in the world, should have to choose between making ends meet and getting the kind of care that they need. Now, what Congressman Mast and his fellow Republicans have done is sabotage our health care system in a way that have driven up the health care costs, limited choice, and decreased quality of care. The votes that he has taken in Congress are estimated to increase health care costs by individuals in our community by $3,000 per family annually. Now, what I've proposed is allowing individuals and corporations, small businesses, to buy into Medicare and Medicaid. How does that keep costs down? Well, first of all, it diversifies the insurance market. When we know that insurance is cheaper when there's a diversified risk pool, which means when more people are covered. This is a way to get more people on the rolls and covered by healthcare systems. Now, in addition, we know that what the Republicans are doing is simply driving costs up through things like repealing the individual mandate, sabotaging the Affordable Care Act. I am out in our community every day, talking to people who are struggling to pay their prescription drug bills, who are struggling to pay the cost of their premiums and deductibles, and who can't understand how they have a congressman who is voting to rip away care from people in this community instead of expanding it.
Congressman Mast, you have 45 seconds.
When my opponent says health care is a right, what she's saying is that she has the right to demand that another person pay for her health care costs. That's not a right that any of us have. Now let's talk about that Chris Murphy plan, that plan to add millions of Americans to Medicare. So all of those Americans age 65 and older that are currently on Medicare, they've paid into that plan their entire working life. And the plan is to add millions of Americans to that who have not paid in their entire working life, so that when their health care costs exceed what they paid in just now, where does that money come from that pays for the rest of their health care? It comes from that trust fund that was paid into by every single one of our seniors. I believe that that plan is the most dangerous plan that we could propose for that safety net that every one of our seniors relies upon.
Mr. Bennett, you have a direct question for Congressman Mast.
Sure. Congressman, shortly after the Parkland massacre, you gained national attention as one of the few Republicans to support an assault rifle ban. And you introduced legislation that would have imposed a 60-day moratorium on assault weapon purchases and transfers, and during that time would have had the FBI director and other administration officials come up with a permanent plan for dealing with those weapons. My question is, your bill only had 2 co-sponsors. It was referred to a couple committees and pretty much languished there. Given your high profile on that issue, couldn't you have done more to either work with Democrats who want to ban assault weapons or bring other Republicans along?
So let's talk about that piece of legislation, number one, and say that that is the only bipartisan piece of legislation of its kind. It may not have a lot of people on it, but it is the only bipartisan of its kind. Now, when we talk about this, I spoke about it recently saying I came out of my corner, didn't attack other people, came out in a way that I was hoping that we could come together, talk about sensible solutions in dealing with gun violence, dealing with mental illness, dealing with individuals on drugs, purchasing firearms, dealing with the issues of the lethality of different kinds of weapons. That was my hope, and it's something that I still continue to work on every single day. I'm proud of the work that I've gone out there and done. I stand by all of the statements that I've gone out there, put in writing, wrote in black ink on white paper, sent it to the New York Times so that everybody could know in perpetuity the things that I believe and the things that I will go out there and continue to work on. That's what I do. I let people know what it is that I believe in. We don't always get there on the first try, but it's something that people know exactly the way that I feel, and that can't be denied.
Ms. Baer, you have 45 seconds.
What the congressman actually does is let people hear what he knows they want to hear and then go to Washington and vote an entirely different way. The congressman made news after the Parkland massacre for coming out in favor of an assault weapons ban, but not confiscating guns from their current owners. There was a piece of legislation on the floor sponsored by Ted Deutsch with more than 150 co-sponsors. Congressman Mast could have made that a bipartisan piece of legislation by signing on. Instead, he proposed his own bill, a 60-day moratorium, which, as the moderator points out, has gone nowhere. It has been more than 200 days since that 60-day moratorium was proposed. Dozens of children, of community members, of friends, of colleagues have died in that period of time on account of the congressman's inaction. I'm with the people in our community who are saying enough is enough.
Ms. McPherson, you have a direct question for Ms. Baer.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Baer, briefly in your opening statement, you talked about the importance of education, and throughout your campaign, you've talked about your commitment to making college more affordable. Now, this topic has been discussed before, not really going anywhere. So how do you plan to make college more affordable? How do you plan to handle the growing problem of student loan debt so young people can go to college, more young people can go to college without having that worry?
Thank you. I think this is such a critically important question because I know that education is the key to opportunity, and too many of our young people graduate from school with crippling debt that they can't repay over the course of their careers. Now, what I have proposed is using the power of the federal government to try to eliminate some of that debt. Now, we can do that by negotiating down student loan rates, by increasing the number of Pell Grants that we offer, by also expanding technical and vocational opportunities for individuals where four-year colleges aren't the appropriate option. And I've also been in support of two-year grants for community college education so that everyone can get a start with the kind of education that they would need, and loan repayment programs for students who then go into public service. But what I know as a graduate of our public schools here, and as someone who was able to succeed in life because of the great education that I have, is that's an opportunity that should be available to everyone in our country, regardless of their race, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their zip code. And instead of supporting an education department that is intent on gutting our public schools and making it harder for students to get through college, I would be supportive of expanding opportunities for everyone.
Congressman Mast, you have 45 seconds.
So let's talk about the opportunities for every young person to go out there and not have college for free, not have somebody come in and pay what they committed to going out there and paying, but allow them to have their education paid for by their service. Every single young American has the opportunity to go out there and do what I did, which is earn a GI Bill. Go out there, serve their country, serve honorably, become a part of a brotherhood or a sisterhood, learn additional skills that are going to carry them throughout the world, and have the GI Bill pay for their education. It's one of the greatest programs ever put into place. Every time that I go into a high school, I know I'm not a recruiter, but I take the opportunity to speak to our young people about that opportunity and hope that they'll follow up on it.
Thank you both. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Each week, CBS 12 News takes your questions directly to congressional leaders to get answers. CBS 12 News is your direct link to your elected U.S. senators and representatives. Connect to Congress on CBS 12 News, the one to turn to.
What if I told you about a kid from humble roots? Swept floors, parked cars, worked his way through college, graduating from Yale and Harvard Law. And what if instead of taking a lucrative job, he chose to serve, joining the Navy, volunteering for Iraq? And what if you knew he's now a father and wants every kid to have the same opportunities he had growing up? How do I know this story is true? Because Ron DeSantis is my husband, and he's ready to serve as our governor.
At Papa John's, when it comes to better ingredients, better pizza, we deliver. And now, in addition to delivering a pizza topped with quality ingredients like real meats with no fillers, fresh sliced Roma tomatoes, onions, and green peppers, and fresh, never frozen hand-tossed original dough, we're delivering even more value with this special offer.
Nothing says extra value quite like our large up to 5-topping pizza for only $13. Order online at papajohns.com. Better ingredients, better pizza. Papa John's.
ComfortCare is committed to improving the lives of those struggling with Alzheimer's and dementia. We educate those who are struggling to care for their family members. We provide the help that gains independence for those who are suffering. And ComfortCare is proud to have been selected to train all Palm Beach County Fire Rescue on dealing with Alzheimer's and dementia. Visit us at palmbeach.comfortcare.com or call us at 561-630-1620. Let our family take care of your family.
Welcome back to the congressional debate for Florida's 18th district between the incumbent Republican Representative Brian Mast and Democratic challenger Lauren Baer. Produced and presented by CBS 12 News, Palm Beach North Chamber of Commerce, and Palm Beach State College.
Welcome back, everyone. We begin now with round 3, questions from our panelists for both candidates. Let's begin with Ms. Samples. What is your question for the candidates?
Polling our news organization conducted earlier this election year indicated wages are the #1 economic issue in Florida. My question pertains to minimum wage, which in Florida is now $8.25 an hour, but that's $3.50 an hour shy of a living wage for a single adult in Florida, according to research from MIT. Do you support an increase in the federal minimum wage, which has not changed since 2009?
Ms. Baer, you'll begin with 60 seconds.
I support an increase in the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. I believe individuals who work hard, full-time jobs deserve to make enough money to make ends meet. And frankly, I'm so disappointed in a Republican-controlled Congress, which has thrown rhetoric towards the working class and middle class folks in our community, but taken votes that consistently make life harder for them. If you look at the Republican tax plan that was passed this past year, it was a massive giveaway to corporations and the most fortunate among us. They argued that this would increase wages, but in fact, wage growth has been flat, and the proceeds from that tax giveaway were used for corporate stock buybacks that are in fact benefiting CEOs, not the people who are going to work every day, working hard at jobs. I'm in support of union labor, and I believe that when you allow individuals to grow from the bottom up, when we nurture our working class and our middle class, that's when our economy is strongest.
Congressman Mast, you have 60 seconds.
I do not support an increase in the federal minimum wage. I believe that we go out there and we pay people based upon their productivity and their time on the job and their education and the work ethic that they show when they show up to work. These are things that people add to their skill set with their time on the job, and as they get better, they become a more valued employee for the company that they're working for, and when somebody else recognizes their value, they go out there and they offer them another job, a better paying job. You know, I think there's a difference that exists here right now between the belief that somehow we're stuck in the station in life that we're in, or that it's a chapter in our life that we get to go out there and we get to change the season each and every day. We get to wake up with the opportunity, and that's what this country provides. It provides the opportunity. We can't guarantee results for everybody. We guarantee that people have the chance to go out there and make the best of themselves every single day, and that's what this workforce is all about. It gives people the opportunity to go out there and earn a great wage and then advance up the scale and earn even more. That's what's great about our system, and I don't want to see it change.
Ms. Baer, you have 30 seconds.
I think what the congressman says is frankly insulting to the hardworking people I talk to every day in places like Indiantown and East Stewart and Fort Pierce. Individuals who work hard sweeping floors and cleaning bathrooms and sometimes picking the produce that we eat. These individuals aren't seeing their wages increase even though they're working hard every day. And the reason they're not is because we have an economic system that tells us that those who deserve to benefit are those at the very top, not those who fuel our economy from the bottom. That's not who we are as a country.
Time's up. Congressman Mast, you have 30 seconds.
We have an economic system where we have the lowest unemployment in decades, lowest African American unemployment, lowest Hispanic unemployment, lowest female unemployment in history, and that's because of the upward pressure that's been put on people to go out there and get to work because of all the jobs that are available out there right now in the country because of the tax cuts that we brought to fruition. It's the biggest problem I hear from every person putting somebody to work is that they can't find enough workers, and as a result, people are getting higher wages. It's a great system that we have here, and that's the way that it is supposed to work.
Mr. Bennett, your question for the candidates.
Returning briefly to the topic of Medicare, every year the nonpartisan Medicare trustees come out with a report estimating the solvency of the program, and this year's report said that if no changes are made to Medicare as it is now, it'll become insolvent in 2026. That's only 8 years from now. Could each of you tell me what changes you would favor to make Medicare solvent, and if you could specifically address whether you support or oppose raising the payroll tax, cutting benefits, or increasing the retirement age?
Congressman Mast.
So one change that we've already made is we've energized this economy. And that's important. When you think about how Medicare and Social Security are funded, they're funded through the payroll tax. So more people out there working, more people earning higher wages because of their productivity means more taxes going into that payroll system, which means it's keeping Medicare more solvent. The other thing that we do that I've been a proponent of, I've been talking about this since I was a first-time candidate, is pushing back the age of receiving some of those benefits. I'm 38 years old, and I would be for pushing the time that we receive those benefits further back. Now, I spoke already about something that my opponent has proposed, which is adding millions of Americans to the Medicare rolls who haven't paid into Medicare their entire working life. That is the most dangerous thing that can be done to gut Medicare, is drawing upon those resources that our seniors have paid in their entire working life and using them to fund the health care of somebody that hasn't paid into them their entire working life. And we have to do everything we can to stand against that bad policy for the sake of our seniors' health care safety net.
Ms. Baer, you have 60 seconds.
Make no mistake about it. Medicare and Social Security are on the chopping block if my opponent gets back to Congress. The Republican-controlled Congress passed a tax plan that increased our federal deficit by $1.9 trillion, trillion with a T. And just today, Mitch McConnell affirmed that they're going to use that deficit increase as an excuse to slash Medicare and Social Security. These are programs that our hardworking seniors have paid into for the entirety of their working lives, and they deserve to see the benefits in their retirement age. We don't need to increase the age. What we do need to think about is reallocating discretionary spending. We need to think about using the power of the federal government to do things like negotiate down prescription drug prices, something that my opponent's not very interested in because he's pocketing money from Big Pharma and giving Big Pharma a $42 billion tax break. Now, at the same time, I would like to point out that he fundamentally misunderstands the plan that I've proposed for expanding access to Medicare and Medicaid. It's a market-based expansion. When individuals buy into those programs, they cover the costs.
Congressman Mass, you have 30 seconds.
So let's talk about that plan. It's known as the Chris Murphy plan. Chris Murphy was an original co-sponsor of the Bernie Sanders health care plan. In fact, every original co-sponsor of the Chris Murphy plan was an original co-sponsor of the Bernie Sanders plan. Chris Murphy said very specifically when he was talking about his own plan that he didn't think he could get to the Bernie Sanders plan right away, but his plan was an inroad to getting to that plan. When we talk about his plan, we should know that people that are paying into that program, they're not going to cover the full cost of their Medicare, and so the costs are going to have to be eaten by those proceeds that have been put in by our seniors.
Ms. Barry, you have 30 seconds.
I've been very clear throughout the course of my campaign that I do not support the Bernie Sanders plan or a single-payer system. It's something, frankly, that I took a lot of flack from my own party during the primary. But I maintain that line because I'm willing always to stand up to my party and because I know we need to make health care decisions that are fiscally responsible. That's why I support a market-based expansion of health care. The congressman can try to pin other people's words on me as much as he wants. I would like to tell you to trust what I am saying and what I am here advocating for, which is a market-based expansion of care, not a single-payer system.
Ms. McPherson, we're going to eliminate this general question now for time. That way we have the same amount of direct questions for all of the candidates and the time will be equal. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to go now to viewer questions, and they're both direct questions for you. We begin with a direct question for Ms. Mayer from Russell S. Will you commit to not repealing the income tax cuts which have helped millions of our fellow citizens? You have 90 seconds, Ms. Mayer.
I have no intention of repealing cuts that have genuinely helped those who need it, which are the working class and middle class in our country. But when you look at this tax plan, what it was in fact was a massive giveaway to corporations and the most fortunate among us. More than 90% of the benefits of this tax plan going to the wealthiest 1% in our country. I believe in equitable tax reform. I believe that our economy grows from the bottom up when we put money in the pockets of those people who need it, which are hardworking families. So I will work hard every day for equitable tax relief, but what I will not abide by is a giveaway to the most fortunate among us that is saddling us with a $1.9 trillion deficit increase that's going to have to be paid for by my daughter, by Congressman Mass' children, by all of our children in this room. We have to be electing individuals who are more fiscally responsible than that. And this Republican-controlled Congress simply hasn't shown any kind of fiscal responsibility or restraint. That's unacceptable. Our tax policy needs to benefit the people who need help the most.
Congressman Mass, you have 45 seconds for rebuttal.
So let's think about that word that was used, giveaway, by my opponent. She believes that allowing you to keep, or your business to keep, more of the fruits of your labor, more of your earnings, is a giveaway. Not believing that it's actually yours and that you allow the government to have some of it, that the government is allowing you, giving you the fortunate grace to keep some of those earnings that you went out there and earned. That's not the right approach to this. Let's look at the benefits of the tax plan that we put in place. The economy is booming. Quarter over quarter over quarter, 4% GDP growth. More Americans in the workforce than ever. More jobs than there are Americans looking for jobs right now. This was good policy. Let's look at how it affected our community. People that work in our community for companies like Waste Management, their hourly employees, getting $2,000 bonuses as a result of that plan. It was good legislation.
This is a direct question for Congressman Mast from Kathy G. Rightly so, military veterans receive health care benefits once they leave the service, but many Florida citizens do not have care because they cannot afford the premiums and deductibles as a result of Obamacare. How can citizens trust that you will place the same importance for their health care as you do for you and your family without implementing a system of socialized medicine? You have 90 seconds, sir.
So when I think about what I want out of health care for our nation, I think about friends of mine that used to pay $200 in their premiums each month and maybe had a $500 deductible. This was before Obamacare. And after Obamacare, they were paying $1,000 in premiums and they had $5,000 deductibles. What I would call a junk plan because it was so expensive that they couldn't even afford to use it. They were being forced to pay for things that they may not have wanted to pay for. What I propose is that we allow Americans to choose what it is that they want to buy in their health insurance. Choose where it is that they want to buy their plans from or not buy their plans from. Allow competition to get back into the marketplace again. In Martin County, St. Lucie County in Florida, we're down to one insurance provider in each of those insurance marketplaces because of the Affordable Care Act. There's no competition in that system. I'm not proposing that we don't make coverage for people with pre-existing conditions. I'm not proposing that we raise rates for any individuals like that, but we have to get back to market-based solutions where individuals get to choose what it is that they want to have covered or not have covered and not be forced into buying things that they don't need. I can speak about this personally. Not one member of my family has ever needed to use mental health insurance. I would choose not to purchase mental health insurance in a plan, not because I want a junk plan, but because that's something that I wouldn't need and I would make that choice for my family. Americans need to have choice in purchasing what they want for themselves and what they don't want for themselves so they're not paying for something that they don't want to pay for and that they may not need.
Ms. Baer, you have 45 seconds for a rebuttal.
This is the second night in a row that Congressman Mast has said he wants to go back to a time before Obamacare. A time when 20 million fewer Americans had health insurance coverage. A time when I, as a woman who'd given birth to a baby, could be told that I had a pre-existing condition and charged more for my health care or denied coverage. A time when my friends who've had breast cancer or diabetes could be denied coverage as well. A time when you could buy plans that didn't have mental health care coverage, not knowing if someone in your family would unfortunately become sick. The fact remains that you can't trust Congressman Mast on this. You can't trust him because he took a vote that would have taken away health care from 74,000 of the constituents in his own district, because he took a vote that would have jeopardized care for the 272,000 people in our district with pre-existing conditions, driving their costs up so high that they would never be able to afford coverage. The people I talk to every day who are struggling with health issues and costs aren't choosing not to buy coverage.
All right, let's begin now round 4. These are direct questions from our panelists for each of our candidates. And we begin with Ms. Samples. She has a direct question for Congressman Mast.
Congressman Mast, you've been an opponent of the Brightline passenger rail project and have argued the company misinterpreted congressional intent in order to secure $1.75 billion in federal tax-free bonds. Yet Brightline was granted approval to issue those bonds in August. With financing now secured, can you offer any solutions for residents of District 18 who remain concerned about traffic, safety, and maritime disruptions that will arise when the northern leg of Brightline is completed?
Certainly. So what you spoke about was one way that I was working on Brightline expansion, but there's another way where we've actually seen answers from the federal government on what will occur with this expansion. I've been working as the chairman of the Coast Guard and Maritime Subcommittee. This actually matters when it relates to railroad in our area because we have 2 railroad bridges that go over our waterways in Stewart and in Jupiter. And when you talk about those railroad bridges going into the down position, they're not allowed to be down in a period of time that's burdensome to maritime traffic. I asked the Coast Guard to go out there and do a study on this. The Coast Guard came back and gave us answers about what they would propose, and this matters for Brightline expansion across the entire district. They said that they would propose that that train not be allowed to run more than 60 out of any 120-minute period, keeping those railroad bridges in the down position. They proposed that there be maritime rush hour times where those bridges not be allowed in the down positions, and what that means is making a limitation across the entire district for the amount of rail traffic traffic that can go through this area, making things fair for pedestrians, for rail traffic, for automobile traffic, and anybody else that's commuting around our area. There are a lot of safety concerns that we need to deal with. That's why it's another good reason that I am on the Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure. It's the right committee to be on when talking about dealing with the issues that we face, from algal blooms, waterways, Lake Okeechobee, and Brightline expansion. That is the right committee, and I would say one more time, my opponent has given us no information about what committee she wishes to be on as a member of Congress.
Ms. Baer, you have 45 seconds.
I've been clear from the start. The Brightline train shouldn't go through the Treasure Coast if it doesn't actually benefit residents of the Treasure Coast, and if it can't be guaranteed to be safe and not do economic harm as well. Now, what we've seen over the last number of months is the conversation around Brightline start to shift. There are now proposals from the city of Fort Pierce and Stewart for stops of the Brightline train. What I'm committed to doing is ensuring that if this train passes through our community, it benefits our community. Now, what can you do in the federal government? Well, first of all, you can try to ensure federal dollars towards things like rail safety, to make sure that high-speed trains are coming through our community safe. But you've also got to be the kind of person who can work and reach out to the communities like Fort Pierce, which is struggling economically, and thinks it could benefit from a station.
Mr. Bennett, you have a direct question for Ms. Baer.
Sure. Let's talk about that column you wrote as a Harvard student shortly after the September 11th attacks, and Congressman Mast mentioned it in his opening statement. You wrote at the time that you were touched by the response of the rest of the world to what had happened in America. But you added, and I quote, at the same time that America calls on the world to ardently preserve our sacred values, it must live up to the shameful history of having so rarely stood up for those values itself. And you also went on to give examples of genocide in Rwanda, civil strife in the Congo, and ethnic cleansing in Bosnia, and you wrote, quote, these events were just as much an affront to justice as were the events of September 11th. My question is, you were a college student when you wrote that. Do you stand by the shameful history assessment of America's history? And as a member of Congress, would you equate civil strife in the Congo with a terror attack on American soil?
9/11 had a profound impact on me. It happened my senior year in college. It's the reason that I went on to serve in the State Department and promote American values abroad, because I understood that we were safer as a country when other countries were more like us, when they were more democratic, when they accepted human rights. Now, the column that I wrote, that both Congressman Mast and you have chosen to selectively quote from, was a column in which I expressed that I was humbled by the response of the rest of the world, which saw an attack on America as an attack on ourselves. And I said, if we are going to have other countries see an attack on America as an attack on ourselves, then an attack on American values anywhere in the world should be seen as an attack on us ourselves as well. That's why I devoted my career, 6 years of my life, to taking an oath to protect and defend our Constitution, to serve 2 different secretaries of state, to promote American values abroad. And let me say something about our history. This is the greatest country in the world, but it is not a flawless country. We make mistakes. And what we expect from our leaders is individuals who are going to be vocal when mistakes are being made. And at a time when we have a president who's cozying up to dictators while he's picking fights with democracy, I would say we need a congressperson who is willing to speak the truth, who's not going to cow to a leader, whatever they say, but is willing to call America to task to always be consistent with its values, because that's the best of our country.
Congressman Mast, you have 45 seconds for a rebuttal.
Ms. Baer and I are almost the exact same age. As she was writing that article, I was raising my hand volunteering in the military. There was a title to that article. It was From Hypocrisy to Humanity, inferring that we are hypocrites. There was this thesis to that article, and it was, America must live up to a shameful history of rarely standing up for those values itself. That was the thesis to the article. I think about the people that I served alongside. I think about the people that went running into the buildings on 9/11, the firemen and the policemen. And I've said it before, I would challenge Ms. Baer to speak to their families and tell them that their loved ones weren't standing up for American values. It's what we are defined by as Americans, that we go around the world and stand up for our values.
All right. Due to time, we're going to go right to closing statements right now, and we begin with Congressman Mast. You have 90 seconds for your closing statement.
I think we can all agree that we all face challenges in life. Sometimes our challenges are physical, maybe they're mental, maybe they're financial, maybe they're emotional or marital or with education or work or 100 different things. But we all know that we face challenges. But we wake up every single day in an amazing country where we get to choose whether those challenges destroy us or define us, or whether we use those challenges as the tool that makes us the strongest that we've ever been. That's what this nation has always been about. That's what this nation is about today. That's what it's all about, living under these 50 stars, these 13 red and white stripes over here. That's what living in this country is all about, that we wake up every single morning getting to choose. Is today a better day than yesterday? And that's what I'm committed to providing every single day as your member of Congress. The opportunity to go out there and decide, is today going to be a better day than yesterday? I am honored to be your representative every single day. There's not one moment where I don't take it seriously. I want to say thank you to every single one of you for giving me that opportunity to go out there and represent you in Washington, D.C.
Ms. Baer, you have 90 seconds.
Congressman Mast has asked us, is today better than yesterday? I'd like to ask you, are you better today than when you elected Congressman Mast? Our environment now, our lake, has 600 square miles of Lake Okeechobee covered with toxic algae. When he was elected, it was 200. Individuals with pre-existing conditions have seen their health care coverage threatened. We've seen costs rise by an average of $3,000 per family. Are you safer? Are you more secure that you'd get the kind of care that you need if an accident or an illness struck your family unexpectedly? Congressman Mast has supported a tax plan that increased our deficit by $1.9 trillion. His party is saying they're putting Medicare and Social Security on the chopping block. As a retiree, are you more secure that you're going to have the fixed income that you need in your golden years? The fact of the matter is, the people in this district deserve a representative who's going to vote in their interests, not for special interests. They deserve a representative who's not just going to say one thing to them in district and vote an entirely different way when they get to Washington. People in our community, from West Palm Beach to Fort Pierce and from Stewart to Indiantown, are sick and tired of politics as usual. They're sick and tired of a representative who lines his campaign coffers with corporate money, tells us one thing, and then votes a different way. If you want to change, if you want to actually see a tomorrow that's better for not just some of us, but for all of us, if you want to see a country that fulfills the promise of liberty and justice and equality for all,
Thank you, Ms. Baer.
Then I hope I earn your vote.
Thank you both, and you may applaud. Concludes the CBS 12 News debate for Florida's Congressional District 18, produced by the Palm Beach North Chamber of Commerce and hosted by the EC Campus Theater at Palm Beach State College. I do want to thank the candidates, the panelists, and our audience. We hope that this has been informative and helps you get ready to cast your votes. For now, I'm Liz Quirantes. Have a great night.
Every evening from around the world.
In Tehran,
Managua, Nicaragua,
Barcelona,
here in San Juan, Singapore,
Across our nation.
Texas, Pennsylvania,
Tennessee,
Florida,
Hawaii,
at the White House,
To here at home.
Reporting live from Stewart,
Boca Raton, Lake Worth,
in West Palm Beach on CBS 12 News at 6.
and the CBS Evening News. Original reporting.
Every evening right here on CBS 12 News.
At Papa John's, when it comes to better ingredients, better pizza, we deliver. And now, in addition to delivering a pizza topped with quality ingredients like real meats with no fillers, fresh sliced Roma tomatoes, onions, and green peppers, and fresh, never frozen hand-tossed original dough, we're delivering even more value with this special offer.
Nothing says extra value quite like our large up to 5-topping pizza for only $13. Order online at papajohns.com. Better ingredients, better pizza. Papa John's.
Are you ready for this? $12 a month, interest-free. That's your low monthly payment at Rooms to Go for everything you're about to see. Over one